Thanks for joining us. Susie had prior commitments or engagements, if you will. That's a slight pun because she's come back from her honeymoon. So this is the gang today. So I want to go through some updates, maybe recap attorney discoveries, and because that kind of it revolves into the long-term financing piece. And then we can also talk about short-term options still on the table. Before that, we'll briefly catch you up on the conversation that we had with Chip from NEMREC. Really enlightening, helpful, and also Jim and Stacy. Was Stacy able to join us? Robin, thank you. I was like, I couldn't see, but Robin was able to join us. So we can just catch you up there, and then he'll tune in here, and we can discuss really what we'd like to see, but also what maybe how he can meet us in the middle, because anyways, our understanding, I think before the meeting was a little bit different, but then afterwards, I think it's still going to be really helpful. And then wrapping up with if we have any considerations we want the council to head. So that's kind of big picture, kind of going like this today. But yeah, all right. Can I pass to you for
quick update?
Yeah.
Okay, I've done this by email, but Pam and Ann and Jennifer didn't have the privilege of seeing that email, so I'll just say it again, and it can't hurt to recap. Every day is a learning adventure, and I had another learning adventure with the attorney on Thursday, yesterday I guess that was. First, even if we wanted to, which I am increasingly convinced we wouldn't want to anyway, it is increasingly clear to me that there's no way for the council to encumber the city with longer than a 1-year short-term debt, pretty much for any reason, but especially not for the reason of addressing prior deficit spending and cash stabilization. So, I mean, that's hard news because we can't make fast decisions and try and, figure something out. On the other hand, I think it pushes us to the right spot, which is the only way we're going to get out of this thing is by being entirely, thoroughly transparent with Newport residents. So while it was hard to hear that we can't make quicker decisions, in fact, it was a conclusion I felt like I was already coming to from a kind of a community connection standpoint. The second point was better news.
I will ask
please.
a question on that one. And this is not because I want to usurp any process or anything like that. I just have to ask this question.
Yeah.
There was no Emergency Powers Act that this would be considered an emergency situation.
Insofar as we are allowed to make short-term debt obligations, there is an Emergency Powers Act.
Gotcha.
So we can encumber the city
as long as it's 364 days of emergency.
Exactly.
We're good. Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure.
So we have some ability to move still, but the box we're in is that whatever we do has got to be renegotiated within a year. And honestly, in essence, that's what they've been doing, right? That's how we got to a $2.8 million line of credit that has been fully extended this year that we still owe $1.8 million on, right? That's a 1-year line of credit the council approved with Pasumsic Bank.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the first piece. Second, and I consider this good news, I was under the mistaken impression that it would take a full 60 days to warn an election regarding a potential vote for long-term indebtedness. And I'm wrong about that. You only need just see if I got it right. Basically, 4 to 5 weeks is enough time to appropriately warn according to charter. The reason that I was under that impression is because I was working under my only experience so far, which was a request, a petition signed by voters asking for a special election for a council seat, which does require, a petition requires 2 months. But if it's a council decision, we can warn it in less time. So that means that we could warn this meeting, if we wanted an election to, an Australian ballot basically to determine whether or not we have permission to incur that indebtedness, we could warn it as late as May 17th and still have an election on sometime the week of June 23rd. And that leads me to my conclusion from those two things, which is one path for us might be to present some information to council the first meeting on the 5th of May, first meeting in May, and say, this is where we think we're headed. We intend to come back 2 weeks from now with some specific recommendations about what a special election regarding indebtedness might, for basically a bond vote, right, would look like. And then we would come back and make decisions on the 17th about a bond vote. And then assuming council approves a bond vote, we would go to work with banking institutions, whoever they may be, right? Could be local bank, it could be someone else, to say, can we arrange for all the paperwork to be in place so that if we get the bond approval the last week of June, then which would take several months to actually implement, we would be able to borrow in the short term against that promise of the bond 3 to 6 months down the road. So that's the process that's beginning to emerge in my head as a likely way that we could sort through this. Any questions about that?
Our fiscal year ends at the end of
June. That's right.
Okay.
And the real pressure here, Travis, is really all about that, because if we had until the end of the calendar year to work out the issue with the SUMSIC line of credit, we wouldn't be struggling so much. But we have to pay off that line of credit by the 30th of June.
Right.
So that was the second item.
So Rick, I have a question. Let me just, I think I heard what you said. I want to make sure.
Yes, please.
So I think what you're saying is go to the voters and say, this is what we're anticipating for a bond. Do you give us permission, or is it,
To the council.
this is what we're going to do?
No, we would have to ask the voters for permission for a specific amount of money for a specific purpose, as I
Okay.
understand it.
Okay.
And then we would have the paperwork lined up to be effectuated, if that's the right word, in that last few
You're
days
doing
of
a
our fiscal
parallel
year,
process.
that would allow us to short-term borrow to pay off the debt to SUMSIC,
Okay.
with the assumption that that short-term debt would be paid off by the bond when we actually
Okay.
work out the
Yeah.
bond.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I know that when I talked to the lady from CoBank, her anticipation, as she said, is most bond paperwork can take months, 3,
So, I'm
depending on
actually-
who.
Yeah, I'm told that actually the likelihood is that we could make it into the August bond pool.
Oh, okay.
And that could happen as early as late August, early September. And then it raises another obvious question, which is if we go that route, and I don't have an answer to this one yet, then what do we do about depending on whether we're borrowing from water and sewer, or we're borrowing for the operating budget.
Right.
And I think that's an open question still. If we did it for the operating budget, we would have to know how we're going to take an approved budget and pay for the debt service in 25, 26, right? So any way we do this, there's still some work, some details we have to work out. And I did speak with the attorney about, the attorney said from their perspective, there's no obligation for us to borrow from the water and sewer side if it's easier to borrow on the operating budget side. In other words, they don't see a regard, any issue there. And I suppose one way, I don't know, I just don't know enough, so it doesn't make sense to speculate about that yet. There's more to learn.
And I'm sorry, one more. Do we know, and maybe we do already, and I'm just not clear, how much the debt is separate in the two pieces, or we don't?
No, here's what we know. We know that as of July 1st, as of June 30th of last year, the due to others line in the water and sewer budget was 1.715 million. And we suspect, because all indications are as follows, that if we were to do that number right now today, it would probably be more like 2 to 2.1 million.
Right, that was the number I heard the other night, so it's just.
So but even if we pay that back, what we still don't know is, what's the amount of money that we really need to operate on the operations side, and what's the best way to handle that? Is it to continue to go out on a line of credit to handle our cash flow? And Jim has shown me, I have it here actually, make copies for you.
I've got copies of it.
Do you have copies? That'd be great. Jim can share this, but he's begun to try and project what he thinks might happen from now through the end of the year, the calendar year. Yeah, so we're getting there. So okay, I'll just finish my report because I'm taking too much time. We just all need to keep in mind that in addition, okay, here's the good news. The good news is the city is not actually carrying a huge amount of debt at the moment. We do not have a significant debt with the bond bank currently. We do have an obligation to go, and it already approved by the voters, we don't need anybody's approval to do it, to go get a roughly $3 million loan to pay off the East Water Tower sometime this summer. We can make more copies in a minute. So that we're gonna have $3 million of debt for that, and Water and Sewer is looking at how to incorporate that into their budget for this year. Just so you know, they're trying to incorporate debt service into the budget that they're working on. We also know that we have an $800,000 bond approval for the fire truck sometime this fall. So we're gonna go to $3.8 million on bond already, no matter what we do. If we add another $2 million, roughly, that takes us up to $5.8 million. And we could theoretically end up trying to borrow even a little more than that, I suppose, if we do something to kind of further stabilize cash position. All of that is obviously dependent on two things. One, can we bear it? Like how do we pay our bills? And two, and this is really important, are we allowed to borrow this much under the charter? And the answer to that, if Jim and I have done our numbers correctly, is yes, we are allowed. The charter allows us to borrow up to, let me make sure I say this right, Jim, $3.50 per $100 of value of the grand list. And if I'm depending on eagle ears over here to make sure that I get this right. But if I'm right about that, then it looks to me like the calculation would be $321 million value in the grand list times 0.035 comes out to $11.2 million. So we can legally indebt ourselves up to 11.2. Whether or not that's what we should do in terms of the city isn't, the city's ability to bear it is a totally different question, but we have the legal authority to do it if necessary. Yeah, go ahead, Ann. Just quick, because we're trying to keep this quick so we can get ready.
Very quick. When you go for the bond vote, you may want to also go to the citizens and ask them for something that wasn't in the original budget. Remember you said, how do we?
Yes, that's true. We
Just
could
another
change the budget
question.
at that point.
That's right.
Or even an appropriation, right? We could even do it as an appropriation at that point.
I don't know.
That's to be discovered. But
Yes.
that's right, Ann. I think.
Yeah, that kind of was my question and going to the budget question real quickly, was the budget built in a vacuum or in ignorance of, and ignorance not being a bad thing,
I understand.
of certain economic situations, and therefore it's kind of faulty? Is that a way to describe it, or was
By
it
certain economic situations, you mean
like this debt load?
the debt load?
The fact that we have a cash flow crisis.
The only debt I was pretty inside the budget process this time. And the only debt that I know that we tried to guess at an amount for and include in the operating budget was what it would cost us to service the fire truck debt starting around November. And we just made wild guess, kind of not totally wild, but we made an educated guess of what we thought that would be and included it. So it's in the capital budget, or the
But this
operating.
other stuff was not in there, so it sounds like.
No one has yet, until whenever we met with Water and Sewer, no one had at that point incorporated the impending water tower debt of $3 million.
So basically, we have to say, previous budget was made with best available information and now with better available
That's right.
information.
Yep,
Well, the general fund budget was made without considering the water and sewer, because that's a separate.
and on water and sewer, it was not included in the water and sewer budget. That's true.
The only link between the two is the general fund's been paying the water and sewer.
So the last thing let me just say this, and then Carter, you can take it back. But the language in the annual report from this year is quite carefully crafted. It says that we approved I can't remember exactly what the language is, but it basically says we approved the operating budget and we presented the water and sewer budget. There was never an approval by city council, nor a request that we approve the water and sewer budget. So the first action at the special council meeting to be held next Wednesday night is going to have to be for the council to take action to approve the water and sewer budget as presented by the Water and Sewer Task Force. And after they do that, then we'll talk about the rate setting that will be required in order to make that budget.
There was a request.
I'm saying in front of council, I don't want to fight about it because it wasn't my rodeo. So I don't want to go down that road because I was asking for it too and it wasn't happening. So,
But the citizens don't get to vote on the water and sewer
That's right.
aspect. They only vote on the general budget
Right.
amount.
that's right. Which is why it's important, I agree entirely with Ann and Pam, that it's important that the council take responsibility to actually approve a budget.
So is that per the charter?
No, they're enterprise.
I don't know.
They're business accounts.
Okay, so I think that's all I needed to catch people up on today.
The rates are supposed to be raising enough to operate the water.
Okay.
Any remaining questions? None? All right, I wanted to take a minute. I just want to talk about NEMREC first,
Yeah,
because I
that's
feel
what
like
I was
that's
hoping.
pressing, and
Yeah.
then we can kind of brainstorm. So, to be fair, going into this meeting, I was thinking statement of work, the maybe kind of deliverables or targets that we had talked about in the meeting. And our conversations with Cynthia were like, we don't have the capacity to offer like basically more of like a temporary financial officer, director. There's different, we kind of mentioned that in our conversation, right? That, you know, you can do both time, but we also contract people out if you are in between with hiring somebody in these positions. So, but then in talk with Chip, it kind of flip-flopped the other way. He was like, I would rather actually be in this role where I look over these trial balances, where I help, he's just more invested and ingrained in the finances of our town. So, in those processes, his background was pretty relevant and helpful. Was a town manager in a couple of places and in other capacities too. So he's very familiar with municipal spending and organizing and accounting. And yeah, it was just enlightening. He had a couple definitely, how would I say, like similar goals. Like he definitely understood where we were coming from, but he was like, this is actually how I would go about it. And he had a kind of a different order, but it would still address and get at the things we're wanting. But I don't want to, because also Jim and Robin were in on that conversation, and we did also talk about the cloud-based service. And that would take a couple months probably. There's 5 other municipalities that are currently on that switch and converting over. But that seemed like he also agreed that that would be a great step. But nonetheless, he said he could get started as soon as the contract was signed, because we'd also sign on for that like emergency backup situation. So he would be able to download the files, put them on his computer, and then start to look over finances. Definitely more of oversight versus like this is, you know, I don't know. I was kind of picturing like we were saying, kind of having a target, goals, and he would kind of tweak them, train up staff, move on. But he definitely wanted to be more around the processes, which was helpful because we haven't had somebody in that role for quite some time. Yeah, any other, what am I missing?
I've got a 4-step process in my notes.
Beautiful, let's move that.
So step 1 would be that it might be 5 steps. Step 1 would be, as Carter says, if it's going to take a little time to get us switched over to the online version, what we can do immediately is pay the $500 fee and upload all of our data into their backup system, which is a smart move anyway because it takes it off-site and means that if something happens to this building, we haven't melted down all of our data. Our team downstairs is doing a really good job of making sure it's backed up every day, but if something happens in that office, we still have lost all of our data. So if we do that, we've solved for the backup problem, and simultaneously it gives Chip full access. He can then download that data and work on it on his home computer or whatever he's working from, right? and get access to everything we're doing currently. We don't have to wait until we're in the cloud to do it. So that's step one. Step two would be to go to work on getting into the cloud, and I think he's made a pretty good case that that should be our recommendation. Robin and Jim were with us, and Robin asked some good questions about other moments when they've gone down for extended periods of time and people have gotten really frustrated. And his answer was that that was at a time when they were working from one main cloud server that they had been told could handle an unlimited number of users. And it crashed, and so then they had to figure out how to add more servers. And they now have 3 servers and are considering adding a 4th right now. So he said those kind of serious endemic problems seem to have been resolved. Then the second step would be he would take that data that he's been able to download now and review our current reports and ask immediate questions about anything he sees that might be amiss or things that he thinks we might have missed ourselves. Like, he looked at it immediately and said, has anybody billed the town of Derby for sewer use yet? To which I'm waiting until Monday to get a good answer to that question.
I don't believe that's happened yet.
I don't believe that's happened, and here we are.
It's always happened from up here.
Exactly. So it looks like he may have immediately, just from glancing at our books, found an error that could bring in a significant amount of money to help us with our current cash flow. So he would look carefully through our books and figure out if there's anything else that he sees immediately that raises questions. Then he would move on to making a series of recommendations on how to reform our general ledger. And he had already had some very specific ideas about that. And just so you all know, Chip was the person in 1996 who worked to set up our current system. So he's actually pretty familiar with what we're doing, and a little bit aghast that that's what we're still primarily using. So
much to Chip.
no. And then finally, he would come to us with a recommendation on the reports that he think will be most helpful to the council. To help us sort it out. And he said again what I've heard others say, which is that municipal governments, by and large, do not depend on a cash flow projection. And that's largely because they know when their big income is going to hit. They can project that well in advance. So he said, the places that do it, they download their information to a spreadsheet. It all kind of lays it out. But he said there are actually reports within NEMRIC that will give us good information, and he can recommend both how to download them, set them up, download them, and how to read them so that it will answer the questions that we have. I think that, and then the last thing I think that he said was, what you need to understand is that the proposal that they gave us is basically, it's not that we're asking for specific deliverables. It's that we're asking them to be hired as our interim finance director. So NEMRIC we would assign NEMRIC the responsibility of being interim finance director. And it might be Chip, but there might be some things that we need to have done that would be better done by someone with a different kind of expertise within NEMRIC who would work with us on specific projects. And he said, basically, we would use this rough outline I've just given you about kind of what the steps are, and they would charge us according to the billing schedule that they've given us, which would be $110 an hour with a minimum commitment of 96 hours over a year. And he was absolutely convinced that the smart move for us is to be in the cloud, because he said, it's going to take me 5 hours to drive back and forth to come see you all. You don't need to pay me to do that. I think that's everything we covered.
Yeah, like just speaking to how the contract finance director, he named somebody that was more helpful in the water and sewer rate and accounting. So, that would be a good benefit too. Yeah.
So we've invited him to join us so that you all could probe with him kind of what I've just laid out. I just wanted you to have the basics. But you are welcome to ask him questions about any of that and let him talk us through what he thinks those first steps are going to be and get a sense of it. Because we wanted you all, if we're going to ask you to make the recommendation to council, we want to make sure you know what it is you're recommending.
Is his becoming the financial intern, whatever, separate from the other fee that NEMRIC's being paid, or in addition?
In addition. So NEMRIC we would pay a new NEMRIC fee of $750 for setup and $20 per user per month. That's the other news he gave us, which was good news, which is that there's functionally no difference between the desktop version and the online version of NEMRIC. So he said that part's going to be the training on that is really just how do you print it from on the cloud. It'll be easy. But no, this fee is separate from the fee that we pay NEMRIC for the use of their software. We're hiring them in effect as the way to fill the finance director position for an interim period.
So I want to make sure, because I'm not sure that you answered Pam's question.
I'm sorry that I missed it.
Well, no, it's okay, because I think we're talking about two things. One, we're talking about the cloud, that's the $750 and the $20 per user.
Yes.
Then we're talking about the 110 an hour for a minimum of 90 whatever hours.
96.
And that role is the one that will act as the interim financial.
Correct. I'm sorry. That's the question you're asking. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I heard the two pieces and I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. And I think there's a third that I'm not familiar with because I haven't been around NEMRIC long enough, but I'm assuming that we're also paying NEMRIC for their
Are we just paying
for the software itself, right? Like I'm assuming there's some kind of an annual fee.
They have to do the software. We have our own IT guy that works
I'm sure
works with Check, but
it's gotten updated to at least 1986, based on what I see on the software.
Right.
86, it wasn't built till 90 something.
What happens if we exceed 96 hours? Do we have to purchase another block, or are we hour to hour?
That's a great question to ask him that I haven't asked. Let's ask him that.
I thought Hal had a good point last time, several, but one of his good points was, what do we get? What do we have substantively after the 96 hours? What tasks have been completed? Do we have a feeling for that? Or are we just getting consulting?
Yeah, what he basically said was, I'm not sure I can answer the question in the way you're asking it. He said, it's as if you hired somebody in your office to begin working on some very challenging situations, and as long as we're clear about what it is we're doing, we'll work on them as quickly and efficiently as we can to get through this list. So he said, think of this as hiring an interim finance director. That's what you're doing here.
And two other questions. What about privacy, whatever you want to call it? How do we ensure that if you have anything in here that's you want to keep private, that it's not all over the web or something like that? I mean, that should be in the contract somewhere. And secondly, the backup that you use now, do you not put the backup into the safe? And is the safe not fireproof?
We have two now. The backup one night that comes off at the end of the day. In the morning, we put it in the safe, and the new one goes in for the next day.
So anything that's in the safe is protected?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
thank
all
you.
locked up already.
I just want to say I'm kind of excited about the idea of cleaning up the chart accounts.
Me too.
I mean, I've seen, just in my work, I've seen pages and pages and pages of charts of accounts that have not been used in eons, and it's just crazy. So I'm really happy about that, and it sounds as if Chip knows enough that, as you said, to open up and look at it and quite possibly find some stuff we didn't even know was there or in the wrong place, or make it more readable, understandable.
That's what I really latched onto in the conversation. Like as a city councilor, when you start the meeting, you just get this giant packet and there's so much. But if we were trained / had the correct reports, every couple weeks we would have a little bit more clear oversight and just like a second. Many of us at this table, but it just allows for that to happen, and that was really
Well, there aren't a lot of accounts. There aren't a lot of accounts that aren't used anymore. There's a lot of zero accounts. They can all be taken out.
Right.
For those of us who use the trial balance every day, it's not, we know where to go. We know exactly where to go.
Yeah.
Somebody looking at it the first time might be a little difficult.
One thing he suggested was that he said, given your current financial condition, this ought to be a topic of conversation at every single council meeting. you ought to be looking at your numbers, new numbers, every 2 weeks and talking about what they mean. And I'm singing my tune, bring it on.
When I was going through this week looking for other sources of assistance, it looks like we're already engaged with the LCT and the USDA. I'm assuming that if there was any help to be had from those agencies, we've already looked at that. But there's another one, MTAP, the Municipal Technical Assistance Program.
I don't know about that.
They provide aid in accessing funding, and they specialize in helping Vermont communities with limited resources, personnel-wise, and was curious if we've reached out to them.
Nope.
They fall under the Vermont Agency of Administration and the Regulatory Planning Commission, or whichever one of the RLCs that works with us.
Yeah, I know NVDA is overprescribed on their MTAP funding, but that's not the only place that Newport can ask for help. So, but yeah, that's a good, I did bring that.
And there is one other thing that I bumped into last week, which is I met a man named Neil Kammons, Kammons, I think. And Neil is the, I don't know what his full title is, but he works for the Agency of Environmental Conservation for the state. And part of what he does is help communities that have to manage debt related to water in particular. And he suggested that if our situation warrants it, they might be in a position to help with very, very low interest loans. So I've written to him and he's written back. I haven't had a chance to respond yet, but I would love it if one of you at least would join me in a call with him to just try and sort out whether there are any possibilities there.
Okay. And from what I can tell, the state's under no obligation to townships to assist if they have budgetary issues, which there's not going to be a state bailout, obviously, if we don't meet our obligations. But they have said that they can provide funding if appropriate, or even advance payments on obligations that they have. Do we have any state payments that we might be able to take an advance on?
We get pilot payments, basically, payment in lieu of taxes. It's about $630,000 a year.
Okay.
That's what we get from them.
And those usually come in November?
Yeah, I think the last one came sometime in October,
So
if I remember right.
it may be possible to get an advance on that. Also, from what I can tell, they do stress that if you see a problem on the horizon, you inform the state treasurer as soon as possible. They're more amenable to offering assistance in that case. Do we have a plan for that?
Jim, that one sounds worth following up on. Like if you'd be willing to make a call next week and say, we're looking at cash flow and Newport's trying to make some decisions to help us with some of the deficit spending we've done. Is there any possibility of pilot money coming in earlier in the year?
Yeah.
That's a great question that I wouldn't have thought of.
And we get contract payment from the Department of Corrections too, but that normally comes in June, so it's
So we should be getting that.
about $100,000.
Yeah, okay.
Should be getting that.
Hi, Chip. Go ahead.
Thank you for joining us. This is the task force. Maybe the owl can do a pan around, but we are not sure.
People introduce themselves. The owl will look at each of them.
Oh, that's
so.
true. There you go. There you go. So I'm Carter. I'll pass the mic down. Oh, you've met Jim
Yeah.
virtually.
Chip and I've met several times
Okay,
before
great,
in the last 20 years.
Hi, Chip. I'm Travis Gaines.
20 years?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chip. I'm Travis Gaines. Nice to meet you.
We're gonna turn you on. Yeah, nice.
Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, Chip, I'm Laurie Grimm.
Kyle Rodenberg.
And we've got a few folks from the community who are here in the room as well, Chip. And just so you know, this conversation is being filmed by Pam Lads, who volunteers with NEK-TV. And so it will be live sometime in the next few days. So just be aware that you're also on TV at this point. Did I turn him down?
It sounds
Chip, can you talk a little bit? We're having trouble with the sound here.
also on our end.
Well,
Keep
you're
talking.
running a deficit in water. You've got some money somewhere else, so we gotta play.
Exactly right.
Oh wait, is that?
You still get me yet?
Yeah, there we go. Now we got you.
There
Okay.
we go.
So Chip, we've just done a quick overview of the conversation that Carter and Jim and I had with you the other day. But I wonder if you might just talk a little bit about your takeaways from that conversation. And then we've encouraged the members of the task force to ask questions if they've got any, and I assume there will be some.
Okay. So the primary thing I think that I found is that council has been getting a trial balance which has been 88 pages long, cumbersome to review, and honestly I think so a bit overwhelming that I'm not sure how anyone can mark that up and make comments. So I suggest that as you start as a committee, that you primarily focus on balance sheets, looking for accounts that hold cash that you can repurpose but not lose track of the fact you have an obligation. As I have from Stacy on April 3rd, a trial balance that was sent to Cynthia prior to, I think, the first meeting you folks had with Cynthia. And I just skimmed through all 88 pages of it, and in seeing where are lined up in the wrong place and how to suppress this down to be more reasonable to be read, and that there appear, at least in this document, that there are many accounts holding funds. And the oddball thing is there are some reserves in sewer that are money market accounts, that if sewer is in debt, I don't know how you have reserve cash. So I did see that there's budgeted numbers for reserves to be contributed to with no actuals, thank goodness. But part of what you're looking for, as far as I know, the bank wants my money if I owe it to them, even if I have it in another account. So, though the intent was there to reserve sewer funds for a Vector truck, I'm thinking you don't have any. It's sitting in that cash account, you gotta take it. A neighbor close by had $250,000 set up in an ambulance reserve fund, but spent it. So this is a case where you actually have the cash, and I think you've got to repurpose it out of those enterprise funds to make the general fund whole as you can get it. I think there's several others that I have seen in this report that you may have resources for. But likewise, talking about trying to get money in advance from the state treasurer's office, which I just heard, is a source. But I also see contracts for dispatch services that are less than 50% of what the budget is. So did we not bill them? I see Derby Center, I think, sewer obligation for $100,000. Did we not bill them? Those are the types of things that when you read lines that actually have numbers, you should be able to narrow down and say, well, what's the status? This is cash we need, let's go looking for it from those that owe it to us. Already, I can see that at least from these numbers, expenditure areas in water sewer are below, and that might simply be you don't have staff. But you are in a condition now where you are less than what you would expect to be at 3/4 of the way through the year. You do have debt payments in both of those funds that have yet to be paid. Usually they're due end of May. So in terms of a cash flow, you might be moving money from reserves to the general fund and then turn around writing a check out of the general fund and pay the obligations of the enterprise fund again. And that's zero. But it's not using more general fund cash directly anyway. Not being familiar enough with total processing through this chart of accounts, I can see that there are account numbers that are defined to be in fund balance areas that look like they should be in assets. And so when you're reading the report, the number that shows a negative as a fund balance is probably a positive as an asset. But is it truly a bank number or is it just a figure? So there are several receivables on all the balance sheets. I assume they're all justifiable by a list of people that owe it to you. And that was pretty much the gist of our conversation, was focus on your balance sheets and see what you already have as resources. I did describe to the group how with one account you can run the whole city, because at home you can do that to manage your car payment, and the truck payment, a mortgage, and your groceries. And the city has all of these bank accounts, because back in the day when someone said we needed to start a fund for a purpose, in everyone's mind that meant we had to open a bank account to do it. So many of the balances here have a fund balance value that acts as if all that money is free and clear. And part of that is this chart of accounts design was really limited to a one-digit fund. And I think restructuring this and redefining the breakout of a lot more funds will make it a clearer picture. And then the ability to manage cash all through one cash account would simplify all of your accounting, and all of that can take place not in a immediate nature, but preferably to a point that you will be in a position where if you can gain some more revenue, that you'll have enough cash. I think your best goal is to end up at zero June 30th.
That's right.
I think if you're gonna end up at zero June 30th, it's start again. You do have what appears to be $4 million worth of taxes to be collected for the current year. However, count on 2/3 of that being education that you gotta send back out the door.
That's right.
That's right, yep.
So the good news is if you could collect 100% of it, $1 million of it is cash for you. However, that $1 million doesn't belong to wastewater. It doesn't improve wastewater or water in any way, shape, or form. It just gets you cash. So both the water and wastewater funds are in deficit. And I think both have reserves. So at my house, if I have a reserve to buy a new truck, but I only have $100 in the checkbook, then I don't have a reserve.
That's your point.
So those are the types of things and observations. And again, this is a report from April 3rd at noon that I'm looking through.
So I asked Jim a couple of days ago what there is in the various funds that the city currently has, and the answer is we've got about 1.5 million in a combination of legally restricted or designated funds, like the Walmart money that was given for a specific purpose that cannot be used for any other purpose. So that's about 500,000 of that 1.5 million is in, or a little less maybe, is in legally restricted funds. But the other million to $1.1 million is basically committed funds, as you say, Chip, that we had an intention of reserving for future spending, but it's our money. So one of the obvious things that we could do, I think that Chip's leading us toward, is say, we're not trying to, the first thing we do is sweep all those accounts and say, this is our new cash reserve. And then we spend the next year or two trying to figure out how we reestablish the cash reserve process. Or 5 or 10 years, or whatever it takes.
From an accounting standpoint, you don't lose at all your obligation. The Walmart money, $500,000, must be used for XYZ. XYZ can still be identified as a restricted balance owed. But the cash flow can still flow to meet your needs. And you know you have to put back $500,000 at some time. You haven't lost track of that's Walmart's obligation or our obligation to Walmart.
So we can borrow against that at any time.
We
can use the cash.
Yeah.
Yeah, although I think,
We're borrowing from ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
well, so let me just say, this may be the point where I actually depart, because in my experience, now again, maybe this is a difference between municipal government and nonprofit management, Chip, but I've spent 40 years in nonprofit management, and when somebody gives me a chunk of money and says, buy, here's a specific example, I want you to buy self-watering water pots for the city with this money. If I use it for something else, without a clear plan about how I'm going to put that money, well, frankly, if I use it for something else, period, we've got a problem. So it does seem to me that even if there's a legal way to do what you're describing, given the reality that no one in this community at this point has any trust that the city can self-monitor, I don't see us borrowing against designated funding that was given with a specific purpose that was stated. I have no trouble saying we're going to take funds that were committed by the council to save for future expenditures. That feels to me to be very different. But I'll just give the example of the Walmart funds. That's $395,000, and the city council voted the end of January that money would be prioritized for getting us through the process of the tax increment financing district application that we have to do over the next year. So I'm not inclined to borrow against that money or any other legally designated money to manage our cash flow. I'd rather go get borrowed money if I have to.
So let me explain to you how borrowed money works. If you have money in the bank making 1%, the bank will certainly lend you that same money at 5%.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. I do.
Yeah.
And so if you want to, you can borrow from yourself at the 1% and make sure that fund still gets 1% as a sewer fund expense. You can book it, create it yourself. It's not cash that you're charging, it's accounting. But
I think
that's the issue that you have, is you do have resources, and in the short term you can borrow, and you can borrow for 1 year as a council, but with a deficit in an enterprise fund, it's really a rate issue unless you're going to have the taxpayers cover the deficit, and I don't think you're going to do that.
I hate.
Go ahead, Al.
You very clearly kind of highlighted the need to understand our accounts, our chart of accounts, the values and the balances therein, whether they're true, fictional, and commitments behind them. So when I start thinking about, as I'm going through the GL and going through item by item, understanding that, I think one of the things we were talking about here, this part of NEMRIC, right? So if we engage NEMRIC and you to do this and help us clarify this, how much time per week do you have to apply towards this? Because we're looking at this 96 hours, which is not a ton of time. I mean, how much, and we're looking at doing this expeditiously. How much time per week are you able to commit right now towards this?
Probably, and daily this could change, but I've done as much right now. I've got 2 clients coming on board from QuickBooks. I just spent 2 hours on one client to convert them. And so I can sit here and work on Newport City, reading and making recommendations, but I'm not the guy who picks up the phone to call the bank to take action.
Yeah.
So much of what will take place will be conversation and emails, but the grunt work really is going to be staff.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I want to make sure there's bandwidth for you, as you know, Jim and his team are going to be doing the research. I'll nicen it up, which is not normally, that's not normally me either, but I like Jim too much. So as they're doing the research in the background and stuff, I mean, if this requires like 5 or 10 hours a week of your time, is that something that's available and is you're capable of handling right now? Just because
Yes.
we're so, this is such a hot item for us that we're good with
Yeah.
that. And then with that type of time commitment, how do you document your billable hours and the progress? Because in project accounting, when I'm thinking about, if it's like HCL, I'm outsourcing my stuff to HCL and they have to give me back my billable hours. How do you document what's been done and how our hours are getting billed?
So most of the time, we are working on data sets, and you may get one line that says reviewed your trial balance from April 3rd. And I started looking at that at 4 o'clock, knowing I was coming in here at 4:30. Because it's almost useless to talk about what you look like without having an idea of what you look like.
Right.
Yeah.
But part of that, if you get to Nimerick Cloud Services, then I can flip around and research something while I'm in the meeting and say, here's what I see. So the prospect of how one spends time on, I'm on a support position, so my time, I'm multitasking all of the time. But like I described in our meeting, if you're reading financials, you need to do that in an uninterrupted phase because there is a pattern you are looking for, and with disruption, you lose track of what you're doing.
I just want to make sure that we have good transparency into the billable hours. That's all I want to make sure of, and if we can be comfortable with that. And then with the things that we've talked about of these reviews, we have pushing it sounds like it's going to be a little while for switch to cloud-based capability because there's other people in the queue right now for cloud-based transition. With 96 hours and Jim's team supporting with the research, does this feel like we're booking enough hours at this point in time? And if we are not, what's the next purchase option? Do we go back to an hour by hour at $1.40, or is it, can we purchase blocks at this reduced rate of 110?
So the bulk time agreement is a minimum of 96 hours in a year. You can use 1,000.
At the same
It
rate?
doesn't,
At the 110?
you got it. It doesn't end until time runs out on the agreement. So here's the quandary, you need the service, we're offering you $1.10 an hour instead of $1.45. You still want the service. The question is, do you want to sign a contract that says you're going to use 96 hours? Because I don't think it makes sense to not sign it and still want the service.
No, that's not the question, actually. We're confident we'll use 96 hours. The question was, what happens if we need more? Are we billing at the same rate, which you've answered.
Yeah.
Nobody at this table thinks we're going to do this in less than 96
We'll
hours.
squeeze it for the juice, trust us. I think those were the questions that I had about the agreement, how the work's gonna get done and everything in this time frame.
Lori?
Yeah, I have a question because, and I'm not sure how to frame this, so I'm just going to try. This is the conversation about the legally bound funds and the other funds. So because of another board that I sit on with the city, I'm aware of an amount of money that's being held by the city, has been for about, I don't know what, 10 or 15 years or something, that has to do with some property in town. And is that what we're talking about when we talk about legally bound funds? Or is that the kind of thing that, because from what I am aware, no, that money's not going anywhere for a long time. Is that the kind of thing that can be used for, I mean, it's not, you know, it's, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000. It's not a ton of money, but it's money. So I'm trying to understand how we decide, you know, what's legally binding. I mean, I understand that concept, but
Wouldn't that
things like that.
I think with the review, we would understand, and Jim's team could say, hey, here's the account with 50, 60,000. Here's the one that is Walmart for 500K. And down the road, I think what needs to be put together is basically a swim lane chart of here's proposed path towards financial reconciliation and improvement. That's the middle swim lane. But then in parallel to it, you have to have, here's what has to go on in order to make this path work. So if we're going, you know, this council, this will make a recommendation that will then have the city council agree to it. Then we're in parallel, you're like also going, we're getting our chart of accounts done, we're getting this, so we can talk to bond, we're talking to bonding in parallel, assuming that this all goes forward. So it's kind of a swim lane approach, but sorry, I didn't mean, I was just kind of, I've been visualizing what this has to be viewed as, because right now it's gonna be too complicated for people to vote on. It has to be visualized.
That's right.
I think Lori's talking about an escrow account that is held downstairs for work on the sand pit on Glen Road.
Yep.
It's in an escrow. I don't believe that's our money. We're holding it for somebody else.
So that is, okay, so that's.
So I don't
an
think we
escrow
can
account.
touch that money.
Okay.
Actually, there's two of them.
Right.
There's a smaller one than that too. But
Okay.
And Chip, how quick can you guys start? I mean, obviously you spent half an hour and started digging into this stuff. When we sign, when and if we sign, that's, I'm sorry, didn't mean to
that's
phrase it that way.
There aren't many choices here. So
How quick, yeah, Chip, you're the big man on campus. How quick can you guys get jumping in on this?
Well, more than likely, I know a guy who knows a guy who can get you on the cloud ahead of other people because of the demand. And the demand would be because I'm demanding it. So if it's moved and passed by the council on Monday night, then by the end of the week, I think I'll have you on the cloud. And there'll be a transition for the staff in the city offices on how they access and perform their jobs. And then there will be immediate access for NEMRC staff to be able to jump in and start looking at things without having to interfere and take over somebody's computer at City Hall.
And drive here to do it.
and drive here to do it, right?
Well, and I don't have to drive there. I can take
Right.
over somebody's computer and they can sit there and watch me work.
Right.
But
So-
right now, there is not a backup to NEMRC that I can recover to work with, and there's not direct access to live data that I can look at.
Yeah.
So Chip, two pieces of information that are new since we spoke the other day. One is that given some extra work or some longer work that the Water and Sewer Task Force has to do, we've moved the special meeting from Monday night to Wednesday night next week of the council. So we will have a decision by Wednesday night on whether to move it,
Okay.
just so you know.
Well, I'm not sure I can get you onboarded by Friday.
I understand. And then the second,
Is that,
go ahead.
yeah, that group is looking at doing, if you will, is a rate study.
That group is going to, we have to make a rate change by the 1st of May if we want it to impact our fiscal year 25-26. So that group is making a short-term determination about, or a recommendation to council about the rate. We're going to set it, and then they're going to keep working over the next 6 months to fine-tune the process with a lot more data, and then we'll come back to this again by fall. So we may go up or down from that rate by fall, but we're going to make a quick decision now so that we're sure that we're not going to be deficit spending in 25-26. And then one other thing you should know is that I was assuming that we wouldn't be able to get on the cloud for several weeks to a month or more. But if it's true that we are on the cloud, then we don't probably need to do the backup system because that will be extraneous once we're in the cloud anyway, right?
No, that won't be. Primarily because a backup done daily is stored for 2 years. So I can go back to May 1st of 2025 in 2027.
Okay.
And right now, I'm not convinced that your backups can allow you to go back and take a snapshot and say, what did we look like then?
So the short answer to my question is, on Thursday morning, assuming council approval, I sign a contract on behalf of the city to move ahead with our hiring Nemrick as our interim finance manager, and we simultaneously sign a contract and move on the backup, the $500 backup that you're talking about, and we immediately begin the process of the conversion to the cloud. We do all three things basically at the same time.
Yes, and all three are independent of each other.
Understood. That's helpful.
Can I ask a brief question? I heard your philosophy about borrowing from funds, but as a citizen, I've watched us get burned by borrowing from funds, hoping that Peter can pay Paul, and then in the end, after years, it turns out we're in a deficit situation. So can you go along with us if the committee decided to be quite a bit more conservative about borrowing from funds? For instance, the Walmart fund, which we know may wind up being used up this very year to do what it's purposed to do. Can you go along with a conservative group of people who might say, no, we're not going to borrow from everything we've got?
Let me explain. Nemrick makes recommendations, does not run the city.
Right.
The city runs the city, and if you make a decision, I'll help guide you on how to account for it.
Good. Thank you.
But certainly, I'm not going to get in a police car and start enforcement. That's not what we do.
Well, I think if we borrow from all those funds, Chip, other than the Walmart fund, we'd leave about $1 million, $1.1 million. People, council have to understand if they borrow all that money now, when these purchases come up or things that have to be done, they're gonna have to wind up borrowing money to do those things.
Truth is, we're gonna have to do it anyway.
Yeah,
That's correct.
it's just timing.
Yeah, in the end, we're gonna have to borrow money to get out of this anyway.
It's all time.
In the town that I live in, the water sewer is in one fund. And I have brought to the select board over 10 years that the due-to from carries $1.8 million. That fund owes taxpayers, and they don't get it.
Well, I've been warning against that for quite a few years myself.
Yes. So this is the case that it's not that amount of money yet.
Well, it is to
But you're
me.
really trying to deal with your line of credit in the general fund.
So I think that kind of covers.
Maybe you started
I think
really
so,
the
too.
bond.
I've asked all my questions. Anybody else at the table have questions for Chip?
Well, I think one of the questions that Ann had asked earlier is the safety
Is
of the data,
yeah,
the
is it
security
SOC
of the data.
Is it SOC 2 compliant? or do we have a SOC report for the cloud-based services?
SOC 2, yes.
It is SOC 2
Yes, we're
compliant.
required to do that because we do a lot of stuff with the state of Vermont.
So
And
that'll cover, that's standard high-level security, web security. So
Yeah.
SOC 2, yeah. And if we could just get it, it'll probably be good for us to just have that on file with Jim's office. So if anyone has any questions about how is our data protected, the SOC 2 report. The SOC 2 report is on file.
If they ask me, I'm gonna tell them to call Chip.
Yeah.
That's what majority do.
Good.
And I mean, we do reappraisals in towns, and our support line gets complaints about assessments. So, yeah, we get more of that.
Awesome. Okay, well, I appreciate you being able to tune in and speak more to how NEMRIC can really help us out at this time. But I want to let you have your Friday afternoon. But we'll be in touch. We will be in touch.
We will follow up right away after Wednesday night.
Okay, good luck to y'all.
Thanks.
Remember, NEMRIC works for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Good night, Chip.
All right, talk to you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, great. Yeah, one thing that how he was able to like filter and look at, oh, there's $100,000 for dirty budget, and I remember getting my tail off for like one grant. That's one of these things he's named, and it's just like kind of a breath of fresh air. Kind of it hurts just a little bit, but it's also like, okay, but that's a good thing, But there's other avenues that might be a little bit more identifiable. So, yeah, any other?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. In regard to the fire department, what truck is being replaced?
One of the fire engines.
Sorry, I don't know which one's which. Fire engine one, I think, I don't know.
I think it's
but-
engine one.
800,000 is a cheap fire engine.
It is, but I mean, is that, so I noticed that the phrasing was that we're obligated to begin servicing this debt, and I get the water tower, but
We are.
We are obligated on both. The truck was ordered a year and a half or more
Yeah,
ago.
that's-
And
on its way.
it's being delivered in October, roughly, September, October. So we'll have to begin paying that debt in
And
November.
they're all custom trucks. There's no.
And this is the second iteration of the truck that we were supposed to get.
Yeah, it's quite a
year
drama,
ago.
actually. They ordered it and the city refused delivery of it because it wasn't what they ordered.
okay.
So this is the second time around.
And this is the reduced price because of that.
That's right.
Because-
One other little piece for the finance team just to be aware of is the the final bill for that was negotiated. It's not even the final. I'll just say, there was a bill that was negotiated for $800,000. We went to the city went to the voters and got a bond approval for $800,000. Then, for a variety of reasons that I think were all legitimate, the city went back, the fire department and the city went back and renegotiated for an additional $65,000 of items for the truck. So when the truck shows up, we have a bond agreement, a bond approval for $800,000, and we have an additional $65,000 that we're gonna have to come up with to pay off that debt.
Is that to replace a truck?
It is.
So what's happening with the old truck?
Yeah, I was just with the fire chief last week and we were talking about that. It's worth, some money, but not a lot of money.
It's gotta be it can't be their main engine then. It's
No,
gotta be
no.
The tower or the
It's not-
reserve engine.
It's not the tower for that
Okay.
money.
No.
So I don't know. I'm sorry that I'm not more
it's
in
fine.
touch with it, Travis. I don't know.
And the price tag is, like you said, it's not a bad price for what we're doing. I just wondered if we had a truck that was out of service for some time, what the demand was to replace it. Okay. As far as the document that we got today of the expenditures, how many employees does that constitute with the payroll and benefits?
I think there's 48 full-time employees, then we got a bunch of part-timers.
Okay. And the expenses other,
That's everything in there other than the
those
payroll
items?
and the benefits.
Okay. And I guess, Beth, both on the general fund, but also water and sewer, who authorizes deficit spending? What's the process? Does the head of that department get to go over budget as they wish, or do they have to come to the council?
In an ideal world that has not existed for some time, there's a city manager, and the department head codes and approves every invoice, which then goes to the city manager. The city manager also approves it, and then it goes to the treasurer to make the payment. Because we don't have a city manager, I'm doing all the approvals at this point. And I'm meeting on a regular basis already. I've met with each of the department heads and looked at, where are you against your budget? Are you going over in some areas? If so, why? Are you going under in other areas that can cover for where you're going over? So we are in fact paying attention to that set of questions. So the fire department is actually our best example of this. Fire department went way over last summer on truck and equipment purchases and truck and equipment maintenance. And when that was determined, when we figured that out, which was roughly the end of September, I believe, there was an immediate move to stop the spending in those areas. And when I met last week with the fire chief, one of the things I was most concerned about was, are we going to see enough savings in other categories? And the answer is yes. So by department, I'm confident that the fire department will come in under this year in spite of the overspending that was done last summer.
Okay. And has anything been done to address spending moving forward, at least for the short term, that
yes,
they have to seek approval? Who's being?
It's different leadership at this point. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Our fire chief is Kevin Lacoste.
Yes, I know
He's
Kevin.
rock solid, and he's watching very closely. And we now have a firefighter, an administrative firefighter, who is in the station over there as of the end of February or so, who's doing a very good job of trying to clean up and maintain things that had been allowed to kind of fall into disrepair. So I'm actually feeling, last summer, if you'd have asked me what one of our biggest challenges was, I would have said probably the fire department, because we'd been through 2 years of trying to find a new fire chief and hadn't gotten anywhere. This year, I think we've come up with an answer that's working really well.
But that's across the board. All city departments pretty much have to come to you or someone to see.
Nothing gets paid without my signature on it. And by and large, sometimes my stack is this high and I'll come in to sign off on invoices. And as I go through the invoices, if it's something I clearly don't understand, I set it aside and go ask the department head what's going on.
Okay. I don't watch every meeting.
Gee, I don't know why not.
I know. Do you feel that
Keep me on filming for no good reason.
I watch a lot of them. I watched some before I moved here.
I love it, Travis.
But do you feel that the residents have a fairly good handle on where we are coming into this possible request for a bond vote?
No, I think the education is going to be significant.
Is there a plan in place to begin that?
Yes. There's a plan in my head that at this stage, what I'm mostly doing is beginning to try and craft language. And assuming we get the votes that we're expecting on Wednesday night, then I think we're going to have to sit down together and figure out what exactly are we trying to do here. I think we'll know a lot more based on who shows up and what their concerns are for the public forum on water and sewer on Sunday afternoon. And honestly, if only 30 people show up, and they're mostly the normal cast of characters, what it tells me is we have a lot of work to do. Because if people knew what we're really up against at this meeting.
At this point, I think, I'm glad that you're being proactive, because our credibility with the city is almost like currency at this point. We're going to have to be able to act and get votes.
Well, that's the really good news about the service that Pam provides. Mm-hmm. Because people who are invested, and I don't know, Pam, what do you figure people are 80, 100 people watching these? It's amazing. People are watching all of these meetings, and they're very interested. And the currency is all about transparency.
Right.
Which is why we've made an effort to do absolutely everything in front of everybody.
I was at a dinner a few weeks ago and talking with some people, and one of the ladies there said, So what are we gonna do about the fact that Newport City is in bankruptcy? And I went, I wasn't as polite as just, but I said, we do not use that term. That term does not apply to what is happening. And if you really need to pay attention, we have some cash flow issues. We are not in bankruptcy. And that word was used in unfortunate situations. And that's what people have to understand. And so that's what I've been trying to do when I talk to people, is to clarify that that is not a word that we need to use. So.
And I just say, Travis, and your questions are about educating the public and the currency is a really good one. And it's honestly, it's why the day after the election in March, I asked each one of the council members if they were open to meeting for a special meeting 5 days later, and we set up this task force and the water and sewer task force. Because the only way that we're going to find our way through this challenge is if the community trusts that people who care, who are members also of this community, are helping to sort this out. And so I think we've done a lot already on that.
To summarize it, you made a point, and I think what you were just saying, bankruptcy is when your assets are lower than your liabilities.
Which is clearly not our situation.
And we are not in a situation where that is the case, because if we can borrow even more than our liabilities, it's just about cash flow.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. And if Chip's wisdom is the wisdom that prevails, and I think at least as far as the sinking fund goes, I certainly support that. We're actually sitting on $1 million that can help us with our cash flow right now that we've been acting as if it doesn't exist. So that's a really good thing too. And so maybe just a word about process, Carter. What I picture on Wednesday night's meeting is that water and sewer goes first. We pass we cuss and discuss a water and sewer budget. We pass a water and sewer budget as a council. And then we have a conversation about rates, and the council hears the concerns of the community and sets rates. And then water and sewer's done its work for the night, and we move on to finance. And I'm hoping that what we would have from finance is, and this is something I would love to have summarized from this team by Monday afternoon, so I can post it as information for people to prepare for the meeting. I would hope we would have a recommendation that basically spells out what we want to do with NEMRIC. 1, go to the cloud. 2, pay the $500 fee for the backup that will give us 2 years previous ability to go back no matter what happens. And 3, sign a contract with NEMRIC to become our interim finance director for a minimum of 96 hours over the next year. And whatever else you think ought to be in that
recommendation. I think that's a
recommendation.
horrible phrase. I think that's going to freak people out. Call them an interim finance director. I think they're just they're a financial consultant.
Yeah.
Or they're
services.
a city, because I don't think he would even have said, they may have used, this is what we're going to function as, but they're coming in as a consultant.
Which he made clear with Ann just a moment ago.
Yes.
Yes, they are a consultant. We are not hiring them to be this. They are here as our financial accounting systems consultants.
Fair enough.
Yeah, they're advising, not.
Yeah, they're not setting policy. They can make recommendations and identify from experience different things. But yeah, I would.
That's fine. I think that's good advice, which is what we're paying you all really big money for, so thank you. So that's the 3 recommendations, and then I would hope that you might also spell out that over the month of May, we expect to come back to council with some specific suggestions about management of cash flow that will likely include, and we don't need to spell it all out, but we'll, if we come back on the 5th of May, my guess is we're going to say, okay, here's what we found in the sinking funds. We recommend that we uncommit those funds and allow them to be used. Second, we think that if we do that and we look at our cash flow management, this is the amount that we need to borrow. If that's what we end up, honestly, I still don't quite know where we're going to be. I think 2-3 weeks from now we'll know a lot more, right? But we think that we are going to have to go to bond And we'll come back to you with a recommendation on the 17th for what a bond would look like. So basically just to tell people what we're going to tell them, so that we're just educating them every step of the way about what the next step in the process is. And if we did both of those things, by the time we get to May 17th, it should be paint by numbers. We know what we're doing. We know what the monies are that are available to us through whatever sources. And we make the final decision on a bond election based on all the information we gathered.
Jim, before you go, do you have any thoughts or want to share what you were thinking about
Well,
in all this?
I don't have a problem borrowing from ourselves, as long as everybody's aware when these projects come along, we're gonna have to borrow. But borrowing from ourselves to get us the cash flow in the general fund, okay, that doesn't take care of the fact that water and sewer still owes us that money. You know what I'm saying? That's,
Fair.
when everything sugars off, water and sewer owes the general fund money. And Chip said, that's
Have
money
they-
owed to the general fund.
Yeah.
Have they put forth any recommendations and how they're going to come up with that money to pay the general fund?
No, they're saying, okay, let's just get us to a non-deficit budget for 25-26. That's our number one priority. Let's make sure that that non-deficit budget includes service on the debt for the water tower, right? And then let's sit down with the finance team, that is all of you, and figure out the best way to approach the fact that we've also got debt that we've got to deal with. So I think they're really looking to you. And they're happy, at some point very soon, we might want to propose a joint meeting
Yeah.
to work on this stuff together. But I actually think the way that it's been going has been helpful. I think the two groups have done good work independently.
Can I ask, when do you put the money, for instance, in the budget for 24-25 in both sewer and water? $50,000 was supposed to go into those funds. When do you put the money into your sinking fund? At the beginning of the period, middle?
Normally,
Pardon?
normally at the end of the year.
So you haven't put,
If there's money there to put it,
you didn't put the money in the sinking funds yet?
no,
Not for 24,
not for this
25.
physical year.
And then we did budget for that money to go in, which might
That's a little breathing space.
taking out of the budget for next year.
Yeah, it's worth our going back and looking at how much we did with that. What did we do exactly? And I'm not interested in trying to change the budget, because I think that's a slippery slope, right? What we can do is say we're going to prioritize differently, and we're going to use the money that was going into capital expenditure to manage cash flow. So, but you don't go back and change the actual budget.
You haven't voted on the 25.
Oh, you're talking about the water
20.
sewer. I thought you were talking about operating.
No, I'm talking about water sewer. That's in water sewer. You haven't even voted on that yet. That could
Well,
come
that's a
out.
good, okay, fair enough, thank you. That's a good point, which is something that I can say to the water and sewer budget folks when I see them on Sunday, which is if we haven't yet removed spending on or movement for capital expenditure, it's time to do it.
It's already been done.
Thank you,
It
Jennifer.
has to be done.
Yeah, there we go. I mean,
The picture is horrid.
yeah,
By the way, I'm on the Water and Sewer Committee, and I was looking through water and sewer bills, which is why I'm here.
thank you.
So, yeah.
Can I just explain this? In the beginning of this, you start with a balance of zero. That's hoping that all this is taken care of by June 30th, and we're starting from zero. So that plays out from there. We have to borrow on the line of credit the first 3 months just to get us to tax time.
And
So if we don't get, we've got to get it to zero in order to borrow a line of credit to start next year.
And
Line of credit.
are we seeing 100% of the funds coming in? Like, what's our collection rate? Are these real totals, the projections moving forward? Do we tend
Well,
to get all of that?
That's my best estimate. My
So
best
it's a
guesstimate.
The 4.75 is
Yeah,
that's billable, not expected.
that's billable.
That's billable. So what you're really thinking about is that in December, that's the billable tax revenue. And then okay, so the balance would be 4.6. Okay, so what percentage of the I'm just trying to do the math here because then that gives us a total to 4.68. Okay, so the 4.68 carries through, so the 500,000. So it could be significantly shorter than the 4.75 that actually comes in. If that's the billable, the actual, you're thinking it's more like 90% maybe?
Some people will be late, some people won't pay until the May payment. Some people won't pay at all. You may have a 120, 30,000 delinquent tax by the end of May.
Okay.
But that's all calculated if everything went the way it's supposed to.
It's the best we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I don't know if I'm asking this question correctly. So these numbers are what the expected. I mean, you've taken the total tax bill for the city and divided it in half roughly and said this is what is going to build in November, which is what we call the first payment, and then the second payment in May. Mm-hmm. So have we looked at what actually comes in?
What's the slippage that we can expect? Is that what you're asking?
Right, because, in my house, we pay the whole thing in November because we've tried to and failed to pay the second payment in April and ended up, a day late and, a fee short. So,
Right.
So I'm just saying, I'm just wondering what the actuals, and I recognize, that we have people that don't pay. We have some people that wait until the second payment and make theirs, or however that, works. But I'm just wondering.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that pay the whole thing in the first round.
Because I guess.
They don't want to pay the 1% then, and then they definitely don't want the 8% in May.
Right.
So, we may wind up with 150, maybe 200,000 people that haven't paid at all
For the full year.
for the full year.
I think what I'm trying to get to is there, I guess it's not really possible because we're really going off the total tax. But, what's being paid in November, is there a way to get ahead of anything out of the deficit? So we're not constantly in a deficit spending. Are we holding on to that extra money until April? Am I making any sense?
No, because we're bottom line, we get it all in October, November, and then we pay the school and pay down the line of credit.
Oh, okay. All right.
Then we're starting over again to build up. Hopefully we get enough in by the middle of May to pay the school their second half and pay the whole line of credit off. And have somewhere near zero, either minus or plus by the end of June 30. Okay. I mean, it could be more than the 33, it could be less than the 33. It's a guesstimate at this point, I can't.
Right. I just didn't know if so owing the school $28.75, the $2.8 million in December.
That's a done deal. That has to be.
What's that?
That
right.
has to be.
But are we paying any more if we have more available? Are we paying any more? Are we holding those monies until we're not making the extra payment until
we owe the school money twice a year, right?
Twice a year.
And we're only
and we
paying
make the payment that's due of that amount each time.
How much?
There's certain dates when we have to pay it. That has to be paid on December 5th and June 5th, each half.
How much input do we have on the budget that they present?
The school budget?
Yeah.
None.
We really don't.
You go to the polls and vote.
I know it was voted. I didn't see a copy of the budget. I saw the city's budget.
I think there's a school
Should have
budget
been
in
a
there
copy
too,
of
in
the
the annual report.
Oh, okay. I must have missed
It's
it.
in there.
It is.
Yeah.
It's in there, and because it gets voted on the same day with everything else.
Right.
It's always high drama. Lately, it's high drama, actually, whether or not it's going to pass.
Yeah, the city and the school aren't lumped together on one figure.
Gotcha.
There's two separate.
So to have any for the townspeople or the city council, anybody to have any input on that? Basically, it has to fail the vote, and then would they engage in talks about an updated budget?
Yeah, I mean, if the vote fails and they don't come up with a resolution within a certain amount of time, then it forces them into a situation where they're based on the previous year's budget and they only have, what's the percentage, anybody know? Where it was 75 or 90%, and some percentage of the previous year's budget becomes the default budget for the following year. So the penalty is pretty high if you don't pass a budget. And last year, not this time, but a year ago, there were a whole bunch of budgets across the state that didn't pass because people were so outraged by spending.
It happened once here since we've lived here.
Really?
But then it passed the second time.
Yeah.
I think that was a high school budget.
Yeah.
So the question on my mind is, at the table, are there some folks who would be willing to take a crack at creating the document that in simple language presents what we are asking the council to do on Wednesday night next week, so that when Monday night I can post that online as a part of the packet?
I would like to raise my hand, but I have to leave town starting tomorrow, and I'm going to be in California for work 24/7 for the next 5
I'm
days.
happy to work with someone if somebody else wants to take the lead on it.
Yeah, I can probably squeeze some time in over the weekend, as long as I can get some information from you if needed.
Great, you can text me anytime and I'll call you this weekend.
Okay.
Okay, I've got a lot to do, but a lot of flexibility around how I'm doing it this weekend, Travis. So, I think, the bottom line is I think we've got those 3 things and then a timeline that we're really saying to the council, right? 1, we want to back up the system. 2, we want to go online. 3, we want to contract for financial consulting. And 4, here's the timeline. Expect us to come back on the 5th of May with some specific suggestions about cash management that may lead us to a call for a bond vote, or may not, on the 17th, or the 19th of May. I think if a 1-page summary of that would probably be sufficient to just let people know what's coming. Okay.
Can you, are you going to issue a transcript from Zoom again?
I think it comes in, I can
If you can just
maybe
send
even
it,
do it right away tonight.
yeah, if you
when
can
we
just send
sit
it to
down.
me,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Can you post this meeting up real quickly to NEK-TV?
No. Because of the way the studio works, it won't go up until Monday.
And
And the only,
And there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, there's nothing Pam can control on that. Right?
Okay.
you got a scoop.
Nice try.
well, no. The reason I asked, the company I'm with, what we do is we take government meetings and take raw video footage and transcribe it and then summarize it. So kind of like Zoom on steroids. And it's specifically focused on government.
Interesting. Well, in some ways, that's what you'll have, because we had the note-taking
Yeah.
being done by the Gemini AI function on this today.
And you'll have it down to 10 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Right.
Or as the meeting the other night was 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it was something. So,
When you have a moment, could you share this Excel spreadsheet with me, like at the beginning of next week or whomever? Because it would be really nice to, okay, these are our targets, this is our plan, temporary plan, present to council. But then as we work, we can infuse this and just have a high level, hey, this is where our attention, this is where it gets hard, but this is where the cash, if we reallocate these funds. And just having a visual, so whenever. Yes.
So you're gonna distribute that document on Monday?
I've announced in a public warning of the meeting for Wednesday night today
already been warned.
that following the meeting of Water and Sewer on Monday night with their final decisions, I will post a packet of information Monday night at 8 for the meeting on Wednesday,
Gotcha.
so that the public has access to what we're doing.
Yeah, that way, I'm also like having, on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, that'd be great.
No, and thanks for this also. I know that getting it to this point, we had, the first time around it was like, now you're just going further in, so.
Yeah, it's a little different than a whole year than just 3 months.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, all right.
I've got it.
I think it's time. think I'm gonna call it.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Everybody have a good weekend.